Webinar AI Adoption in Action, Transforming Learning and Business Operations. I'm Jared Hornsby. I'm here today to help with any technical questions that you may have. Feel free to drop those in the Q&A. But before we get started with today's event, I'd like to go over a few items so you can know how to participate in today's event. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. You can send in your questions at any time. We will collect these and address them at the end today during the Q&A session. I would now like to introduce today's speakers. We have Matt Donovan, Chief Learning and Innovation Officer at GP Strategies, and Jeff Fissel, Vice President of Technology at GP Strategies. Fellas, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jared. Let's first test here. Let's see if I can get the PowerPoint presentation up.
You got it. I got faith in you.
Did I do it?
It's popping up. It's coming up here. It's still white for me. Now I see the screen. There we go. I think we're good to go.
All right. Awesome. Well, I guess we can reintroduce ourselves now, Matt. Do you want to lead the charge here?
Absolutely. And I appreciate, Jared. Thanks for the quick introduction. I think, Chief Learning and Innovation Officer means I have the really cool job of being able to look out in our industry and the industries of our customers, look at the trends and signals, sees what's coming through. AI is definitely one of those big topics that we have out there. But at the same time, I also refer to myself as a recovering instructional designer. I am classically trained, but I fully believe that as we go into the new phase of, the world of AI-enabled design, AI-enabled work that we're going to be doing, we're going to have to think differently about how we approach, the learning and performance support side of the units we got coming forward with that. So anyway, that's me. Jeff, I don't know if we want to add a little bit more to that.
Of course, I love the title Recovering Instructional Designer, so I'll be inspired by that, and I'll call myself a failed developer because I do have a degree from an engineering school, and that is where I started my career is building technology. But I realized real quickly there were many people way smarter than me than that, and now even AI that does that. So as the Vice President of Technology at GP, I have the privilege of working with our team to help figure out especially over the last 2 or 3 years, Matt, like getting to that, how to do things with generative AI, how to get to those promised productivity gains that we've all seen and past the tinkering and all of those sort of things. So I'm excited to share some of those examples and some of the learnings we've had with you all today. And I see an interactive chat already, so please feel free to ask questions, yell at us, heckle us, whatever you'd like to do to make it more fun on this Thursday afternoon in the chat. This is your session, and we'll have some fun. So with that, let's go ahead and click into the, wrong way. That way, I could work buttons. To the next slide. Matt, you want to?
Yeah, I'll tee us up here. And I think one of the things I like to kind of set up this conversation, especially when it comes to AI and adoption of AI in the space, I want to take a step back, and I firmly believe that the L&D organization itself is facing an inflection point, and we can go ahead and click forward here. But I think the big thing that we're going to see is this shift in the way, or an opportunity for us to go from this concept of cost containment as a function within organizations to a competitive advantage. And what I mean for that is I like this metaphor. I use this as a supply chain about 25 years ago. I think they were actually confronted with a very similar experience of what we're seeing here. So if you think about it, 25 years ago, supply chain management was about the location of warehouses, the price of gas, working with unions, things like that. It was very much cost containment. You can get next. And that kind of sets up that Kmart and Sears were two companies that really mastered the art of being able to put a product on a store shelf at pennies. And they had really great distribution systems. They were able to do it. They mastered it, but it was about cost containment, doing it as cheap as possible. And then what you did, I had Amazon and Walmart entered the space, and it was more than just putting a tube of toothpaste on the shelf after one's been bought. They really started to think differently about how they integrated data inside the systems, and they started to be able to use the technology with that to be able to drive insights. So they were able to use data and the relationship with their vendors, and they went from being cost containment to a competitive advantage. So they were actually able to see insights and buying patterns, help that whole entire chain think about bringing better or different types of products to the table. So it went from, again, this cost containment to competitive advantage, where I believe fully is that we're in a very similar place in the L&D space, especially when it comes to AI, because we have the opportunity to say, can we step up? Because imagine if you were able to draw insights from your workforce and the problems that your performers are solving and what they need to learn to be able to perform, and they're at the very forefront of solving those customer challenges, and have those insights feed the company's strategy. That's a powerful place. So the company that can move its workforce quickly and respond to that will be better competitively advantaged. And I think in the L&D space, we have a huge opportunity to step in with this. So anyway, appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about that. Let's go to the next slide. And I think one of my favorite stories to talk about how we as an organization start to really think what we're doing and how we get it done, and really shifting the paradigm of how we relate with meeting the needs of our learners. Go ahead and get next with this. I don't know how many of you may be familiar with the book Wrinkle in Time. When I was growing up, it blended a great story with some science fiction with it. But in the story, an adult's trying to explain the concept of a tesseract to a child. And they ask the child, they say, what's the shortest distance between 2 points? And the child intelligently answers, it's a straight line, of course. And so for us, the straight line for us is between the learner need and the learner enablement. And of course, the adult who's trying to explain the tesseract actually says, and you click the next one, it says the shortest distance between 2 points is when you bring those points together. And that's what changes it. And this is the paradigm, is that L&D itself has been trying to work through the system to kind of shorten that, to thin that line. But the idea is that with the support of AI, intelligently adopted, we can start to bring those points together. And we're no longer the line between them, but we're the ecosystem around them that helps us actually deliver that moment of need, shifting from this org-centric to a deep learner-centric based on what they're working on, who they're working with, how they're skilled, all of that, being able to deliver that to what I call deep personalization. So all of that, again, is thinking about how we start to think differently about the way things we've done them in the past. We go next slide, and it really
well, Matt, on this one, I do think like it hits me hard when I'm like, I've spent a lot of time optimizing that line. Labor arbitrage, tools, tech. Like I think of all the things that, like, as a technologist, we're like, oh, how can we make that line more efficient? So to me, this point really resonates of like, hey, can we just bring them closer together?
It's a Sisyphean task. You can only diminish that line. We have to really radically think different of how we change solving the problem. And I'm so excited because we have new tools, or tools are emerging that actually give us that advantage to be able to start to tackle some of these problems. And by the way, Susan, thanks for the shout out at one of your favorite books. I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. So one of the things we're also looking at, so Jeff and I work with a range of partner organizations across a range of industries. And I was recently asked for a couple of the CLOs to say, hey, can you kind of come together and see some of the changes that you're seeing in the L&D organization? And so I pulled together a really looking at, I think, pull the next slide up, Jeff, is looking about how not only we're adopting and changing and responding to the adoption of AI, but how the organization's set. So I've got a table I want to talk about, but first let's talk about the overall adoption journey that we're seeing inside of organizations. So if you go back to when ChatGPT first hit the scene, October 2022, I call that the individual phase. We all went out and got free licenses. We were trying it out. We were training their database, all of that. And over the past couple of years, what you started to see is organizations have moved to what I call the internal phase, which is they can now use internal tools like Copilot or other tools to be able to actually, on their own data in a secure way, to be able to use it in their tool sets. But it's largely about me trying to do what I did yesterday with the addition of AI. I kind of call this productivity because we're having individual productivity gains. But what we're seeing is a few organizations are really starting to move in this third phase, which is what the integrated is. And this is where you really take a step back and you really rethink the actual workflow with a new layer of saying, how does the human plus AI fit in and change the work that we're doing? So that will be able to allow us to really do this. So we're helping organizations make that shift, and that's where you get performance. And I think there's been some of the challenges between saying, well, we're getting at some adoption, but we're not getting real ROI yet. Well, you're going to get a lot of that. ROI is going to tick up with the investment in AI when you get into the integrated phase. So not only in the L&D world do we need to rethink the way we do our workflows, which is what we're talking about today, but it's also wherever the work happens, whether you're in marketing or sales or R&D or manufacturing and your touch points as you shift from a human to a human plus AI workforce. So this is some of that were the evolution that we're seeing.
Matt, do you see that I don't want to say controversial, but the MIT study that came out that was basically like most initiatives are failing and that kind of thing. Do you think that's because of that gap between internal and integrated?
Well, I mean, there's two things with that. One, I would say is that I think the MIT study probably needs to be taken with a grain of salt. I think the underlying message of that there are some challenges where it's not getting adopted, but I think there's some underlying elements. I don't think it's 90% of it's not happening out there. I think the study was, it probably needs to be looked at the construct of the study and how much you put in the weight. But I'm glad you mentioned it because it is an indicator that there is a sense that we aren't getting as much value of it. We're getting productivity individual, but we're not getting organizational performance. And that is, I think, some of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see that. There's a lot of, I think, quick wins people see to summarizing, writing an email better, building an e-learning or an assessment, these very kind of tactical internal things, but that's the integrated bit that I too believe that's where the value will be.
So as I was kind of talking, as we start to think about how AI kind of shifts when we talk about learning and development organizations or those that kind of pull the training inside the organization, we're seeing that this shift around these dimensions, like these 7 dimensions, and no organization is doing all of these, but these are representative of some of the changes we're seeing. But I think the big one is really going from a truly org-centric rolled out to balancing between the org's needs and the learner-centric, getting more and more learner-centric, the workforce going from human to human plus AI. That's a big shift. And it's, shifting your workforce from thinking about as me to the we, the me plus AI. The change approach, this is underlying AI as we've seen. It's like AI is constantly evolving. And once you thought it was set, it comes out and improves or changes or differentiates. So there is no end to the change. It's going to be continuous and agile within the nature of what we're seeing. Learning operations, I'm seeing a movement towards less siloed and more integrated or connected, really bringing that together, focusing on how they can do things faster or better or new with the leveraging of AI within it. Let's see, we talk about the outputs moving into AI assisted, asset enabled kind of learning experience. We're starting to see an emergence of that. And then governance is really how do you help manage the continuous change in a supportive way to be able to do that. So more bi-directional, flexible. And the last one is around measurement. Instead of just learning metrics only, you're talking about embedding metrics into both systemic and sustainable ways of measuring across the business. So you're not just trying to go out and figure out, did this have impact? You're actually getting those data feeds early on. So quicker, sooner, whether or not you're getting transfer or impact in the work. So anyway, these are just some of the trends that we're seeing. And the big picture is how it drives the way we're looking at it as we internally or we work with our partners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, this one, if you've seen any of the work I've done before, there's probably a whole 30 or 45-minute conversation on this slide. So we're not going to dig too deep into this, but the first 2 columns left to right here are the ones that we really want to call out. One of the things is being able to leverage inside as we move to what I call a connected learning organization, meaning that we're creating the connection amongst the learners, the performers, but we're also connecting across L&D to talent, to the business. Is that connected space and being able to drive and build experiences that cover not only the 5 moments of lead, and I love what Bob and Khan have done in that space around that. But what's beautiful about it is it goes from the first moment when I've taught you something to the moment I apply to when something changes or something goes wrong. Being able to drive your experiences so that it becomes ruthlessly relevant for the end performer or learner is fantastic. But you also need to think about, while those are all performance norming or convergent conversations, I'm trying to get you up to a level of performance. I also need to think about divergence when I need to innovate or grow for the next role. These are ways we do this. So how do you start to build a system and putting out outputs that allows us to do that? AI can help us scale the generational outputs. So I can build something really solid for the first moment of need and then wrapping the right context into restructuring, I can actually rapidly generate something that rolls out. And we have a great example. I think Jeff's going to talk about that a little bit later. The second component, which is really we're changing the dynamics and what we want the learners to be. Historically, we build something, we roll it out, launch it on the LMS, and then they consume it. On this side, what I want to shift the learners from is just a consumer to now entering into the actual conversation. So they are moderators, curators, contributors, creators, collaborators. This is really the heart and soul of the agility in the learning organization. When you bring the learners and performers up to speed and they're actually contributing, this is really helps you when something goes wrong, when something changes. They're the ones on the front lines that are dealing with this and helping and using AI to enable them to rapidly generate and share concepts based off of good validated source insights. That's where it really becomes powerful. So these first two columns, as we start to really think beyond the traditional way we were building for the first or second moment need, or we're building for consumers, we're really changing the paradigm of what we're building. And AI now allows us to realistically start to be able to achieve this at scale. Before, we just don't have the time. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah, no, the time, but I this actually helps. Oh, I always anchor back to this a lot because in the tech world, we get asked all the time, can you build me a chatbot? Man, do we get asked to build lots of chatbots. And chatbots are great, but I think it's good to think about it as chatbots are great for the performance support elements on these moments of needs. And when I have a question or a need, it doesn't necessarily address those other points of learning need, which I think if you lose track of that, if there's a rush towards everything at the point of need in chat-based format, you're going to lose out on a lot of the actual learning that happens. I know you and I sometimes debate or have good conversations around like access. Now that we have access to knowledge so much faster and better than we did before, what do you actually need to learn? And I think that becomes an interesting discussion for sure in an organization. All right.
Yeah, I'm watching the chats. We're going as well, Jeff. So I'm just checking here. I posted a question out there asking just to check in and see if this kind of resonates with you. And I love pushback as well. If you challenge me or you think you're seeing something different, I'd love to hear that as well. I'm always, my wife, when I wake up in the morning, helps keep me humble every day, saying, you got something wrong. Let me help you out with that. So I look forward to the discussion here and what you guys are seeing out there as well. So love to see the chat. Would love to see you guys engaging with each other as well. So AI readiness, this is one of the things. So we talk about this transformation as we're moving forward. And one of the biggest thing is because when you don't know what good looks like, in that future state of an AI-enabled organization, whether it's the L&D function or the broader organization, when we don't really know what good looks like, and everybody tells you that they know exactly what good looks like, they're selling you something. So if you don't know what good looks like and you are going to progressively get to it, an AI readiness diagnostic becomes a very powerful tool, something that you can do along the change process to evaluate how are you doing with the strategy culture as you shift towards an AI or a human plus AI workforce. The governance enablement, how's that changing? Your mindsets and skill sets, are you putting them in place for folks to actually grow and enable around that? Data and technology, have you really had a forward-minded data strategy towards AI that enables AI systems of the future? The technology bring that. And the last one is really thinking through that measurement. So this is a tool, and we've built a tool to be able to help not only us as an organization, but also with our partners as well, to kind of continuously get a beat on how we're progressing along that line. So thinking about your readiness, having a good benchmark to help you think as you're going through, as you progressively get to good, becomes a very powerful tool. And Jonathan, I saw your note about data enablers. Let me come back to that because I think I'll add a little bit more around that. But that is a really good question. It's an important part of that success. Thank you. And Eugene, I love your comment here about the difference between knowledge and behavior. Absolutely. Being able to change behavior is really, and that's at the core of mindset. So that's great. Actually, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So let's go ahead and push that forward. And I think this is one of the most important things for us to do in the future is that we need to, sometimes historically as learning designers, developers, or learning organizations, we tend to focus on the content, what I want to teach, what I want to talk about. What I'm saying to succeed in the future around AI, you've got to start with a mind for the work. What is the work that they're going to be doing? As you shift from human-only work to human plus AI work, how will the workflow change? And it is an ability to be able to kind of pull forward and have folks work through that. So yeah, being able to set that out with that. So I think we can pop to, unless you wanted to add
Matt,
something.
I want to anchor back to a couple slides. One,
Yeah.
there was a question around that dimensional assessment, and that is that GP specific, and then a little bit around how are those implemented. Just before we move into that, if you want to quickly hit those, or we can also follow up with them offline.
Yeah, and absolutely we can follow up with that. And I think the biggest thing is that we work with a range of organizations at different points along the maturity curve. And so there are many factors in the organization. So the idea is to give an indicator, and based on where they kind of are, the strength and enablers. So let's say some organizations have a really robust data strategy and plan. So you may be doing a moderate shift towards an AI structured data set. Or if you have knowledge, and there's a lot of organizations, and we've even had this challenge, is how do we get good at knowledge management because it's been struggling for years? There you may have to be more robust in the strategies to get up to speed, because AI doesn't automatically fix the legacy of knowledge management challenges that we've had. It can help in certain dimensions, but it doesn't solve it.
Yeah, no, for sure.
This gets back to the concept of when I talk about a human plus AI workforce. I'm trying to provide a metaphor here about when we talk about intelligence and wisdom. And so intelligence is what AI will bring at scale that exceeds what humans bring to the table. Wisdom is what the humans bring, the value of the lived experiences that brings insights into the work we do. And where you look at the human plus AI, it's a very synergistic relationship. And the idea is that you have to have both the intelligence and the wisdom for the system to really work. So the differentiator here is I talk about, intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Of course, I get people to say, maybe it might be good. And experimentation, sure, but for most of us, I don't think I'd want my tomato in my fruit salad. But the idea around this is that knowing that the lived experience around this is what a fruit salad tastes more like, or what I've really enjoyed and experienced, that's the wisdom. And what we want to do is to create the systems and the agents and the tools. We set up and enable the humans to be the humans we need them to be in that human plus AI relationship. So where we do this is it's about changing the mindset, skill set, and tool set. And this is one of the things that I think we've seen a shortness in the early stages of this, is that organizations have started on skill sets. So they've talked about like prompt engineering, for example, or they've started with the tool set like ChatGPT or Copilot, and they do that. And the problem is they're seeing some challenges because they haven't really addressed the mindset. So the difference is the mindset is the attitudes and values you bring towards, for example, problem solving. So if I were to go to law school, I come out with a mindset about how I solve a problem through a legal mindset. And there's a certain way. And then you have other dimensions. You could go to engineering school and you come out with a way in which engineers look at problems and they solve it. So mindsets are the attitudes and values that we bring that, and they nest into the behaviors, and then the skill sets layer onto that. We have people that are learning how to do this, but that shift from the me to the we, where I start from that, I start to solve my problems through AI. I start to think about how I leverage AI. I start to think about how do I impart my wisdom with AI and evaluate the outputs, or better create better inputs into it. That is making sure that you have all three of those components in here. So you were talking earlier about that behavior change versus knowledge. Skill set, tool set is part of that knowledge. This is a change management effort. AI is not a tech adoption challenge. It is a human change management challenge wrapped in a tech adoption. And the point of that is that, if you think about it, ever since the invention of work, this is the first time humans have had to question, what's my role in the work? I mean, really, for the most part, we've always had better, more sophisticated tools, but now we're actually talking about AI taking over substantive parts of what it is that we have done. And so we're kind of vying, how do we figure that out? So part of that is helping the group shift with that mindset, skill set, tool set is really how you have to tackle the whole bigger picture.
Yeah. And Matt, there's a good question about like how the potential problem. This is a big kind of a debate of how do you get the wisdom without doing the work?
Perfect. That is a great question. So what you're setting up with, and there's a great book out there that really focused and brought this together, but you're going to see a wisdom pipeline challenge. It can potentially. So right now we have a bunch of people who do have wisdom, but when they retire or leave the workforce, how will we bring those people up? Because how I used to do it is I give somebody new something to do, they go do it, I provide feedback to them, coaching, and they get better off of that, right? That's how we did it. If AI is doing all the work, how do we actually get people to gain wisdom? And I think that is going to be our super challenge that we've got to figure out. How do we start to come up with new strategies to create wisdom without having them to have to do all of the work? So is there a way to kind of create that crucible of wisdom generation? And that's a challenge. I don't have 100% of an answer, but I love to see that is a really great problem to fall in love with.
Well, I do think that someone through AI coaching, I do think some of the like we can simulate some of those scenarios now to give people safe, faster, better places to get that wisdom that aren't as scarring maybe as some of the ways we've gotten it in the past.
Yeah, and I think it's being able to change the full range of that. And I love the ideas popping in here. And Jay, you're absolutely right. Wisdom is gained experience 100%. How do we help them gain that experience without having to do it? Can we create simulators that expedite or accelerate the process? Are there ways we can look at that? I think AI, I think, is also part of the solution to the problem it creates or the challenges it creates. So I'm excited with that. Amy, I think AI coaching is fantastic. There's so many shades of what AI coaching looks like, but I still think that the AI coaching still brings in the humans as part of that. So, all right. So this is when you think about human plus AI, what we think about, we start to look at how do I bring AI into the workflow? How do I start to use it for automation, generation to generate answers or concepts from a set of existing materials, or prediction, or based on what was trained, or then large data sets at scale. So we start to take a step back and look at how would we start to rethink the way we do work, bringing AI in to automate or generate or help us look at data at scale. We also start to move down this pathway, and it's already been moving aggressively from tools and assistants down to peers. Now they're on my team. I've got a couple of AI agents working on our team to now a manager. And this one really used to rankle me because I'm like, there's no way an agent will ever be my manager. But if you think about it, we've already seen where, like if I'm on an agile workforce team, I could have an AI agent helping me with the backlog, which in a way is taking inputs from the humans and helping manage the backlog in an agile system. It almost becomes telling me what to do, but I've deconstructed the concept of a manager, and not just it's our legacy view, but we start to look at it differently. So I think those are some of the big ways, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how we bring that in. I think is it the next slide we pull in? And so what I did, I'm going to go through this one really quick. But the idea is I've taken this as a way to take a step back and think about how do we look at the workflow challenge. So in this one, this is like the organizational goal is to create consistent, high quality performance conversations. That's the goal of having good performance conversations. That's what it is, not just to have them, but to make sure they're consistent and high quality. So the question is, if I take a look at the step, and I just mapped out 9 steps here, from remembering to scheduling it to collecting feedback, all the way you're going through here. This is the traditional performance consulting kind of workflow, so to speak. If I were to take a step back and look at it, there are ways in each of these phases where I could bring AI in to be able to increase the likelihood of success. Because one of the biggest failure points is I forgot to schedule, and I didn't schedule it. And it's the last day of the 3rd month of the quarter, and I got to get my quarterly performance conversation done. And I jump right past down to step 7 because I didn't have any time to do anything else. We have the meeting, I file it, and we move on. So what it does is AI can actually help remove some of those barriers. It can help, remember. It can say, hey, Matt, you haven't scheduled your meeting with Tom. Would you like me to put it on the books? It schedules it. And it also says, hey, would you like to see what you talked about in your last conversation? It can pull it forward. It can also say, hey, Tom's working with these 10 people, and you'd like to ask these 5 questions. Would you like to send me these questions out to those people, collect their feedback? It collects it. It can send it to me. I can review it. It can anonymize it. And if I'm comfortable with it, I say, can you share it with Tom? And then in case it says, hey, by the same way, we've also got some great resources, or a coach or a mentor. Would you like me to schedule a quick conversation to think about prepping for your conversation with Tom? So now that assistant is kind of pulling me through and helping me through that process. setting me up to have a really wonderful conversation because there's feedback involved. Tom's prep, we've thought about it coming in. I've actually had time to reflect on how to do a great one. And then depending on how it comes, it can actually collect the data and the outputs from the actual meeting. It can help file those. And then it can actually then say, here's 9 action items you agreed to. It can pulse and follow up as you go. What the key here is that this changes it from the problem and failure points around performance conversations is usually not because people don't know something. It's because environmentally we don't get them scheduled. We don't create time. So most people know what's included. It's just how do we help them do that? So this creates the likelihood of success. But I think the other side of it is now when I start to look at it as an L&D operational, what do I bring to the table differently? I start to bring these things. It's not just a course. It's not just a big launch and a town hall. I'm actually starting to bring the things down here at the bottom and bring solutions very differently to what we have. So it's not just how do I do and build courses easier yesterday? How do I help AI not only make and streamline the likeliness of performance export, but also what I'm building to enable that success as we go through. That's the key example down here that kind of goes through with that. So I want to show that because we want to talk a little bit about how we kind of get into these different steps and how we've kind of taken a step back and looked at some of that.
Yeah, well, and we're going to get into some of that practical stuff. I noticed, Matt, and I've joked about this quite often. You didn't say build something to do the performance conversation. No performance conversation pot, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think here's the scary part about this is that the scary part for the humans in this situation is that if I remove all the other failure points, I really have no excuse to not have a good conversation. The awesomeness is I get to focus on having a good conversation, but now it means I have to have a good conversation. And that can be exciting and terrifying to some people. But for learning and development professionals, how I can help you have a better conversation is exactly where I can deliver value, help you be better at that.
Yep. I respect. Yes. Got Jay. You got Jay's respect there. And I agree. I think this is a great example. And we've been working with a lot of organizations to think about like, how do you lay out these processes? Because I think there was a rush to the tool set. Agentify that. Agentic AI will solve that. Let's automate and agentify that. But then we don't necessarily know what the process even is we're agentifying yet. And it's a cart before the horse kind of thing. And I think a lot of us need to rethink like, okay, what is the process today? And to where you started out, this brings it back. It's maybe convenient that the art director used the same bullets here, but how do you bring those two things closer together in those moments of how do you start to shrink this line?
Yep.
So
Rethinking it, really coming to it with a different lens, getting back to that, thinking about performance is the real outcome. We wanted not just to know things, we want them to perform better. We want them to be able to be in systems that enable them to succeed and perform. And I think if designed well, and we think about this in the right way, man, we've had an opportunity to solve problems that have been around for a long time that we just haven't had the ability to really solve.
This is the new stuff. This isn't just doing this all faster. It's how do you make time to do the stuff that you couldn't do before.
This is about better, 100%. Better or things you couldn't do before. Absolutely new. Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we think about that, if I take your wisdom, and we can't have a webinar about AI and not mention the word agents in it, or we'll get canceled probably. So we're going to dive into a little bit about how do I take that wisdom and apply it into kind of how we can start to do this. And I'm going to share some examples of what we've been doing with some customers around that. But I first wanted to reset on a little bit of definitions around agents, because there's a lot out there. And I think everything's an agent now. Every prompt I write is an agent or whatnot. And I asked my good friends AI to help me with this here. But I want to, in the context of this conversation, think of them in sort of 3 buckets. The first is our single prompt agents. These are the GPTs, the Copilot agents, the thing that has a system prompt and does a single job. Then you get into more of the complex, like prompt chain, a thing that does a sequence of jobs together to get to an outcome. And then you get to the real fun bit over there on the right, which is the full agents talking to agents, workflows, reviewing each other, like more of the autonomous side of things. So when I think about like kind of examples of this, a simple agent prompt. This is very much your GPTs, co-pilots of the world. We're all in the learning-ish profession here. So it's like, hey, I want to create an agent that helps me write better learning objectives. So we, in that LLM prompt, put a good prompt in of, hey, you're an expert at writing learning objectives. Use the Bloom's taxonomy. Use terminal enabling. You give it the instructions on how to write a good learning objective. So user provides input. That prompt, Mad Lib style, gets filled in, sent out. Out pops amazingly written learning objectives. Like very simple, tactical kind of way to think about this. And there's lots of value in these kind of single prompt agents. You start to take some of the tedious stuff you work, but it doesn't necessarily like solve any massive problems that are out there. You can start to go a step farther and get more into these like kind of prompt chain ones. And I think this is even more wisdom here. Many of you might have tried this. I did. If you upload a video to Copilot or to ChatGPT and say, build me assessment questions, you will get random acts of assessment questions. You'll get stuff about how long it is, what color t-shirt the person was wearing, and all kinds of random facts that will come out of that. But you add an extra step in there like, hey, process that transcript, detect or generate learning objectives or outcomes. Step 3, anchor assessment questions to learning objectives. Boom, you get exponentially higher quality learning objectives, assessment questions at the end of that. And that's that wisdom step in the middle that Matt yells at me quite often about, of like, hey, how do you embed that expertise in there so that as you start to scale these outputs, you have more reliability in it, and it's not just a guess if it's right. Matt, anything you want to add in here?
No, I mean, I think it started to get the biggest thing that helped resonate with me, and you always have to dumb it down for me when it comes to tech, but it's really trying to be able to think about it as fit for purpose agents being combined to either have a single task or a collection of tasks that in coordination it's being able to do. And so do you kind of chain them sequentially, or do you chain them and layer them? That's where it starts to be getting interesting. But around those agents, what doesn't work, which I had an early assumption is that one big agent that did everything isn't really the direction that we're going. And actually it doesn't work well with the data sets and the tasks and activities. Actually, you get better performance by having these discrete fit for purpose agents that then can be orchestrated into bigger outcomes.
Yeah, Matt, I love that you teased Google Learn About. That's one of my favorite examples of kind of stringing these sort of agents together in a learning experience. I need to learn about something, help me understand it. So apologies for people that are outside of the US. I believe it's only available in beta in the US right now. But if you haven't seen Google Learn About, it's a pretty spectacular tool of kind of how it can start to generate content dynamically, personalized, and to hit those different moments of learning need. When we think about kind of the process, of course, that can be super complex, but one of the key components that I think when we start to see this work at scale is putting in feedback loops and AI corrected feedback loops. So where an agent is reviewing itself, because it turns out if you ask an agent to do a lot of things or an AI to do a lot of things, it sometimes gets lazy and does not do all of those things. So if you check its work and notice that it didn't do all the things, it then can continue to do that. But that's a human programming in what does good look like. Hey, if you're writing good learning objectives, these are all the core components that are a part of it, or these are the components of this, and make sure all of those are in every output you generate. And if they're not, go back and try again and put them in there. So again, that's applying that wisdom and those reviewers as you think about kind of applying that wisdom or expertise into applying this. This isn't the intelligence. It knows about the Bloom's taxonomy. It knows about all these things. It just doesn't know how to apply them necessarily. And that's what we're helping do.
Yes, Jay, garbage in, garbage out. You do have to work on both ends. And even if you have good in, you can sometimes still get garbage out. And that's why that part of that wisdom to help it get better. But the nice part is you can just take it back and have it rethink, reevaluate, rework with it, etc. So it's a very different way we're connecting into it.
Yeah, let me share some. I'm going to tempt fate, Matt, in a webinar, which I feel like no one ever does, but I'm going to pull up some live demo stuff here, and we'll see how this works.
And setting the stage, Jeff, while you're pulling that up, I think this is our approach, is that when we started to look inside the L&D space of doing some activities, here it is. We good. You can go ahead and set us up. What are we looking at? So this is one that I'll set up real quick, is just around, I think we're doing the metadata generator, for example.
Exactly.
So one of the big tasks and activities we've dealt with is that when we create a learning, we put it onto the LMS, and we know that if we're doing this at scale, the metadata isn't always clean, isn't always consistent. And so one of the activities we often help our partners is we would go back in and go through and assess all of it, get it clean, so it's searchable, findable, all that. Well, AI is a perfect example of a tool, created an agent that allows us to go in and look at 100,000 courses, and based on what's in the course, recommend, here's an abstract, some learning objectives. So what used to take literally hours per course is now able to put an output that then a human can quickly go through and validate and be able to do that. So show us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So metadata is the most exciting thing in the world now. But I'm going to show it to you in some HTML format, some examples here from an internal presentation that I don't think Matt gave. But you do have lots of them. I think this is another part in here. But the metadata becomes really important for a couple reasons. One, understanding what we have today. It turns out a lot of organizations have really smart people that love talking in hour-long plus blocks. The good news is we record those hour-long blocks, but bad news is no one ever watches those hour-long blocks. And there's tons of good information in that, or long-form e-learnings, or a lot of that traditional learning content that was there. And how can we start to understand what's there and then use that knowledge to start to create new derivative work? But the first part is understanding it. So in this case, this is an hour-long Teams meeting that was uploaded, and we're starting to generate, again, titles, descriptions, target audience, prerequisites, things like that. Tagging it to a skill taxonomy, understanding what's going on inside of that, generating learning objectives in a terminal and enabling kind of fashion. So again, this is helping us understand what's going on inside of this content. And we actually find these over time more valuable than we find skill tags in some cases, because skill tags are just a set of words. And this gives you that depth, a little more of a dimension that you need there. Information about the speaker, who's talking, what they're talking about, their justification of that. So I can start to know who are the authoritative voices on this topic. All of this information being pulled out of a piece of video. But then we start to break this down. And this is what AI is really good at, is building out this outline. Since this is time-based, it's video, we're getting step-by-step instructions here like what's covered, not instructions, but this is an outline of exactly what's covered at specific moments in time. So this becomes, again, helping us get more value out of what we have. I'm going to get a little fancier here. And one of the best practices of chatbot implementations is actually to precede a chatbot with synthetically generated Q&A. This helps improve the reliability, speed, and accuracy of those bots. So one of the things that we started doing when we're generating metadata is actually generating FAQs based on that content that we know are good questions and answers. So you can think of this almost as like SEO for AI, is how do you help it guess better? That's where metadata becomes kind of really, really important. And one other, I'll show you kind of example here, I'll skip down, is like topics and keywords. And I want to talk about weighted density here, because this becomes important, because tagging is a thing that we've all been doing forever, but a tag doesn't really mean much. So how do you actually get to that, what's actually covered in the content and how much of that's covered there? And I see Matt laughing, so I don't know if I said something funny or if Matt...
No, I was responding to Jay. He says he loves listening to webinars at 1.75 speed. I think we all do. So that's anyway, about it. I was laughing.
Yeah, this density matters. But Jay, I'm gonna go even a step farther with that, because that is, we'll show you an example here in a second, a thing we wanted to help solve as well. But again, this understanding of the content becomes really powerful. And now that we have this understanding, we can start to pivot into use cases where we want to go create new work. Well, actually, I'll take that back. One thing we can do with all this data is we can start to then write evaluator agents that sit on top of it. So maybe we take a rubric of some sort that we have that has criteria and metrics and all of that, and we ask AI to evaluate that piece of content based off of that that content. So again, this becomes a really powerful way once we understand the content that we can start to scale our understanding of it and apply some analytical knowledge of what does good. And these are all human defined criteria. That's the wisdom built in here of what are the metrics that are here. And then we're just asking AI to do the work and do that work at scale for us. This has been kind of really helpful to understanding all of that stuff. Then, okay, so we take that content. One of the things that I'm in a tool of ours that's all built in it's all Azure, a bunch of Microsoft tech services strung together. We call it AIQ, but this idea of starting to ground working based off of that. So I'm going to stick in a specific area. And what I'm talking about here is as we start to create new work from that, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, I want you to only know about the stuff in this knowledge base based off of these files. This is kind of similar to, I think someone said Notebook LM or some things earlier. I heard tools out there. Is grounding becomes really important. Setting learning objectives, setting tone and style, so that then when I'm in here and I start asking the tool to help me create new outputs, outlines, scripts, branching scenarios, videos, assessments, podcast briefs, you can start to embed, you can start to be trust in those kind of outputs. And I'll show an example here. I'll just call this an intro video. In the tool, we've started to embed some of this kind of question asking. So you'll notice here, before it goes off and starts creating a bunch of stuff, it's asking to ask me some questions, which are rather logical. Hey, who's it for? What are you trying to do? What's the goal? And this kind of critical thinking moment we find helps people create higher quality content. And we like applying kind of AI into that to cause that critical thinking to happen, and that there isn't just a magic go button that just does learning for you. Because sadly, I have yet to find that. But in this case, this is going to start to write a video script for me and all the things about it. And we don't have time to go through all of these, but you kind of start to see the example here of what it can do. And as you start to build this stuff out, it can have all kinds of good details in it, visuals, all the stuff that's there. And you can take this and send it to whatever tool you want, PowerPoint, Word. If it's video, send it to Colossian or Synthesia. I actually think I have a great example where I took one of those branching scenarios on leadership, and all I did was click a button and it sent it to Colossian here and created an interactive branching video for us that has a synthetic video and audio with interactive elements built right in. And this is done again in a matter of seconds, which I think is kind of a really powerful way to think about what you could do. And to Matt's point of all the different moments of need, like we can do one of these to hit all of them in the amount of time it probably took us to do one before. And then layer in other languages too. And that's where your mind starts to blow when you think about that. There is, sorry, Susan, no magic learning button. I wish it was. We were talking about before the webinar, brain chips and matrix style injecting learning into us, but I don't think we're there yet.
Nope.
One last example I want to share, and I'll bring it back, is, again, we talked about that metadata, that long video that we had, that hour-long video, and it turns out no one wants to watch hour-long videos, so they watch them on 1.75 speed. But as I thought back to my days at university and college, I was like, oh, Cliff Notes. What if we could create the instructional short version of that video and try to help condense that down? So one of the things we created is a series of agents that take that presentation, slide by slide, pull out the core talking points that are covered, and then create a script that talks about that. And what that allowed us to do was take an hour-long presentation and then create an 11-minute version of that. So that's better than watching it at 1.75, I promise. And you're getting the density of that, the dense elements of it out there, and then having the ability to click in and scratch deeper in the moments that you need to. So this was kind of a workflow where now we can, in a matter of minutes, start to create new derivative work, but based off of sound instructional design principles. It builds the storyboards. It anchors it to the learning objectives. All that stuff that I was talking about that's in that agent flow becomes really important to being able to do this at scale. And I know, Matt, you always like to give me a hard time about you can't take something you're supposed to learn in an hour and jam it into 10 minutes, but I'm trying real hard.
I know you're trying. There is no magic pill. The human brains are still kind of like it. If it's something I've not known before, it's going to take time in certain things. But if I have a scaffold or I understand it or a prior existing with it, small bits of extending that, definitely in smaller. But sometimes we just treat everything one size fits all in how we approach it. But yeah, we are not to that point where you just plug in and it's like, I know Kung Fu. We're not there yet. I know Jeff will be very happy when that happens. And, but I do think one of the things, there's been lots of good research about what's going on out there. One of the things is that we have to have people that are really thinking about how they are engaging with this. And that's the step up. So the humans in the human plus AI workforce need to be critical thinkers. They need to think about the problem and solving it because you're moving up the value chain. And we need them to be that. You can't just always accept the output from the machine and not challenge it. But the problem is it is getting better at being a prolific BS generator, which looks really good. And we have to think differently about how we take a step back and critically think about what's missing, what's not there, which is a harder task than actually looking at something and evaluating what's there. So these are the things we have to do that.
Yeah. There's a lot more noise. You're proficient.
It is, and it's getting better, and on the surface makes sense. But then you have to take a step back and be really critical on what you're seeing, because that's when it really gets good. Is when you have that challenging and that pushing of that's what really gets good. Versus, this hyper. Actually, Harvard posted an article about the hyper amount of work slop that's being generated through the age of AI without that critical thinking coming through it. So, and I think that's for us, as for humans, as we find our place in the workplace, is how do we bring that brilliance to the table to be able to do that? How do we continue to add value? How do we help those humans again become the humans we want them to be? This screen here where you're looking at it, this is just a way that we kind of took a step back and looked at the instructional design kind of workflow. It is very ADDI in its structure. We do Agile and a variety of other things. But what we started to do were to map not only how we bring tools to it, but how would we start to incorporate these tools in a different workflow and a different way to be able to do it. My one example is like with using AI-based translations. And AI translations aren't for everything. But imagine being able to, instead of waiting until the English version or the gold version is done before you go out and translate, what if I were able to reach out to subject matter experts in their own language? So when I generate the first version, I can generate it in the native tongue, not translated, it's generated. And they're able to provide more insightful review early in the process. What if I were able to do that immediately? Now it changes. I got to track changes across languages and things like that. But the point is we don't have to wait till the end. But if I move it up, what are the benefits? What are the challenges? Think about that, how that restructures the workflow. Can we move faster? Can we get better? Because now they're reviewing earlier in their native language. That brings in context and localization to it. Absolutely. So this is just kind of a way we've kind of broken down different tools across this, and just a handful. This is just a scratching the surface of all the things we're exploring out there. So the 6 takeaways here at the end, we kind of pulled these together. One of the things is that it's going to be a journey as you're adopting it inside your organization or working with others, whether it's in the L&D or helping the business do this. Evaluating readiness is going to be because you're going to be on a journey, and the shift to maturity is not a linear curve or not a linear experience. It's going to be that. So take time to continuously evaluate, are we making progress? Lean into the integration. Don't try and just do this from instructional or the L&D space by yourself. Collaborate with others. Anchor to the work and the performance. Get back to that. There's a ruthless relevance that centers around being able to do the work, and that's really important. Don't just work on skill sets and tool sets, incorporate the mindsets into it. Adopt an agentic approach in the flow of work, thinking about how you're bringing in those fit for purpose agents, you're orchestrating them to really design it. And the last one is, like we started off with that readiness, measure that progress as you're going. How well are we improving? Are we getting faster? Is the learning velocity increasing as we're moving forward? So anything you want to add on this, Jeff?
No, I think you're right at the end with the velocity comment. And I like to think anchor to the work. To me, that's what I always think back to is like, what is the job to be done? What are we actually trying to do in this moment? Not necessarily how we've always done it. Because that's hard. It's sometimes hard to get out of your own way doing that. And that's where we've seen the biggest productivity gains is when we're able to rethink a different way of doing the work. Not just automating what we've
There
done
were a
today.
couple of comments that I wanted to kind of catch back up here with.
Yeah.
So Freedy, I hope I'm not butchering your name, but it is a philosophical question. I like that. How will we gain deep expertise if we only consume summaries and summaries? 100%. And that's why we have to begin to build wisdom for what we are. We do have to realize that if I go out there, I may be, I may get a lot of insight, but that doesn't equal lived experience. So being the difference between, let's say, for example, knowing to articulate and define the 8 elements of a great brand plan and knowing what is the construction of a winning brand plan for my organization and my competitive environment. The difference between those two, I can get a summary of this one. Knowing that winning brand plan in my context is where it makes all the difference. So we have got to get that. And you can't assume just because you have a summary means you're automatically brilliant. You got to find new ways to say, how do I take that step up or that advantage of a summary, but go back and check that assumption that I know it because I don't know it. How do I now get deeper in that experience with it? So it's a great point. I'm glad you pulled that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, we did it with time to spare. I'm sure there's some questions kind of coming in. I'll just our contact information is here if anyone wants it. And 4 minutes to go. It's amazing how that works.
Yeah. Any final questions, or we would love just validation or anything. If it resonated with you, anything to love to final thoughts on it, would love to see them dropped in here. I know you guys all have other things you're going to be doing today as well, but love to see that.
I saw a question come in earlier. What AI readiness diagnostics do you recommend?
There's actually several of them out there. They all kind of take a slightly different. The AI readiness diagnostic that we use really has a much more focus on the human plus AI side of it. It's AI with it. There are other organizations out there. You can use a search, and they have some that are somewhat readily available out there. But if you'd like to learn more, you can reach out to Jeff and I. We'd be glad to kind of share what we're seeing out there as well.
Gotcha. Are you seeing any other? Do you have any recommended literature on AI? Reading up on this so we can kind of gain some.
Oh man, there's tons of good stuff. Jeff, what would you recommend?
I always tell people to go Ethan Mollick. He's one of my go-to reads right now on all things AI. He's a great read, great published, anchored on good data. So if you don't already follow Ethan Mollick, I think he's a great place to start.
His blog post is called One Useful Thing. And what I like about him is that he kind of is outside of the large language model providers. So he's able to provide a critical view and insight on it. And actually, for example, like the MIT research we were talking about earlier has a very insightful reaction to the data and what's good in it and what questions to ask. But I always like the way he tackles it. There are a couple of others out there that are in that space, which are really critical thinkers and assessors around that. So they avoid the hype and try to get back to the reality of what we're seeing.
Gotcha. Excellent.
Sure.
And I think that's going to be our time for today. Thank you, Matt and Jeff. Thank you to everyone in attendance today. Once you leave today's event, you'll receive a short survey on the presentation, and we'd really appreciate it if you filled that out and provided your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link of today's recording of today's event. On behalf of GP Strategies and our presenters, thanks again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.